welcome to This Week in History with Mike and Will. I am Mike.
And I'm Will.
And I am Mike.
And he's Mike.
And this is This Week in History, where Will looks up a historical event that happened this week, and he has 1 hour to explain that event to me. All right, and so today we are discussing the Irish Declaration of Independence.
Correct, sir.
January 21st, 1919.
Yes.
Right.
That's all that explanation you need.
Let's find out.
Let's find out.
Ready?
I'm ready, sir.
Okay.
Okay. Whereas the Irish people is by right a free people, and whereas for 700 years the Irish people has never ceased to repudiate and has repeatedly protested in arms against foreign usurpation, and whereas English rule in this country is, and always has been, based upon force and fraud and maintained by military occupation against the declared will of the people, and whereas the Irish Republic was proclaimed in Dublin on Easter Monday, 1916, by the Irish Republican Army acting on behalf of the Irish people, and whereas the Irish people is resolved to secure and maintain its complete independence in order to promote the common weal, to re-establish justice, to provide for future defence, to ensure peace at home and goodwill with all nations, and to constitute a national polity based upon the people's will with equal right and equal opportunity for every citizen. And whereas, at the threshold of a new era in the history, the Irish electorate has, in the general election of December 1918, seized the first occasion to declare by an overwhelming majority its firm allegiance to the Irish Republic. Now, therefore, we, the elected representatives of the ancient Irish people in national parliament assembled, do, in the name of the Irish nation, ratify the establishment of the Irish Republic and pledge ourselves and our people to make this declaration effective by every means at our command. We ordain that the elected representatives of the Irish people alone have power to make laws binding on the people of Ireland, and that the Irish Parliament is the only parliament to which people will give its allegiance. We solemnly declare foreign government in Ireland to be an invasion of our national right, which we will never tolerate, and we demand the evacuation of our country by the English garrison. We claim for our national independence the recognition and support of every free nation in the world, and we proclaim that independence to be a condition precedent to international peace hereafter. In the name of the Irish people, we humbly commit our destiny to Almighty God, who gave our fathers the courage and determination to persevere through long centuries of a ruthless tyranny, and strong in the justice of the cause which they have handed down to us. We ask His divine blessing on this, the last stage of the struggle which we have pledged ourselves to carry through to freedom.
Well.
Wow! I managed to do it in less than an hour.
That was quick. That was exciting. Now we know the Declaration of
Irish Independence. Next subject.
Thanks for coming.
So,
next week, what?
This, I have to explain it now. That was the Declaration of Independence from Ireland. Now,
Of Ireland from
England. Now, there are so many layers to all of this, and actually I'm going to do an entire episode on what they referred to as the Rising of 1916, which is called the Easter Rising, and that happened on Easter. So we're going to actually talk about that when that comes in April.
Okay.
But that is kind of this major event that is a culmination of all of these troubles and struggles and turmoils within Ireland. There's two troubles. There's the troubles, and they both happened in Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
There's the troubles of 1920 to 22, which we'll talk about today. Okay. And then there's the much larger troubles that almost every any Irish person over 30 has lived during the troubles.
Yes.
And that was 1960 to 1998. Okay. And it's a very complex and very painful part of Irish history.
That is so quaintly called the Troubles.
That's why there are so many things in Irish history where they like downplay the awful. There's a revolution that they called the Hurries. And it's like, yeah, we just kind of hurried it along. It wasn't a big deal. It hurried. It's like, yeah, but it was a rebellion.
Well, those Irish are poetic.
They tend to be very poetic. So they refer to centuries of oppression, and they refer to this English garrison. Yes. There's different versions of what they meant by it. The language is really important because the way they phrased it is they don't openly declare war on England. They just say that they are an independent country. So any foreign country stationing soldiers in their country is breaking their own laws and invading them.
Okay.
so that they have the right to drive out foreign invaders, which every independent nation has the right to do.
Sure.
Unless you negotiate a treaty or it's America, then we can just go there. That's a rule, apparently. We just
Apparently.
have bases everywhere. I will always love that picture of how dare this country put itself so close to all our bases. And there's usually a picture of like China just surrounded by bases.
Yeah.
Not great. If I was China, I'd be a little.
Well, here this week in history, we have no political stance.
No
on
political stance.
Current
just-
U.S.
we
operations.
just tend to be like anti just invading
Yeah,
countries
that's true.
and big wars and
Yeah.
such. So, because history, it never
Yeah.
ends well for anybody.
Well, at least for the poor people.
Definitely, always for the poor. So the rich people tend to do quite well.
Sure.
That benefits them. They're like, oh, give us stuff. So they talk about these centuries of oppression and occupation. So we have to talk about when and how the English got there.
Yes.
1169. Since 1169, there were what were called the Anglo-Normans, which is the French-English knight class.
Okay. It's about 700 years.
700 years. So they typically talk about 700 years. It's a little more.
Sure. Roughly.
Roughly. And what this all started as is Dermot McMurrough was the king of Leinster, and he got booted out of the kingdom. He was deposed. And he said, well, I'm tired of this. I need to kick the crap out of the fellas who kicked me out of my own country, and I'm going to call for soldiers. And he contacts the Normans, who love to fight and smash faces and kill people.
Okay. This is in Ireland.
This is in Ireland. So so Ireland isn't just like they have a high king. But they have several smaller kingdoms. So there's Leinster, there's Munster, there's Ulster.
Lots of good cheeses.
Lots of great cheeses. And England at this point has been conquered as of 1066. That was when the Norman invasion happened. And they have this really powerful military class of mounted warriors in heavy armor, the knights.
Yes.
Ireland doesn't really have that. They have mounted warriors, but they're typically not heavy-duty fighters. They don't have the same feudal system. They're fighters and brawlers, but their wars tend to be much smaller scale.
Well, they are on island.
They are on an island, yeah. And Ireland has withstood invasion for centuries. Like the Danes invaded. Dublin is a Norse city. It's a Viking city. The Vikings invaded, made Dublin. We talked about this on the founding of Dublin. And then they just kind of got absorbed into Irish culture and became Irish.
Okay.
So you don't see like as much of the Danish influence that you see like where Vikings went everywhere else. You don't really see that in Ireland. Ireland's like, well, they're all Irish now.
Yeah. The Irish tend to do that.
They tend to do that. They have this it's a weird, it's not common around the world where other people like colonize and then they usually take over. But in Ireland, people move in and like, well, now we're Irish.
Well, there you go.
It
Everyone
just
wants
is-
to be a little bit Irish.
It's really appealing. Well, look at St. Patrick's Day.
Sure.
Every St. Patty's Day, everybody in America is like, I'm Irish. I'm 164th Irish. And I'm
It
just
counts.
gonna lean into it today. It's like me saying I have Irish family because one member of my mother's family was from Ireland. And she
Counts.
off the boat. It counts. And I always say that's why I'm so fiery. It's like, well, that's the Irish side because everybody else is like Teutonic.
Okay.
They're all like Germans and Finns, so they're very stoic people. And then there's
That seems like an anti-Irish thing, though.
what?
He's always fiery.
Well, it's fiery,
He's
passionate.
Irish.
Irish are passionate folk.
Sure.
They tend to downplay things. Like personal tragedy, downplay. Everything else, fire. Like, yeah. They're passionate folk. They're poets and...
Yeah.
But yeah, so the Irish at this time, though, they have like this warrior aristocracy, which is common across all of Europe. They have this strong sense of oral tradition and artwork and all these other things, but they don't have nearly as strong of an administrative structure. The peasantry are allowed to kind of wander. They don't have to swear fealty to a noble. They can work for one and then be like, I don't really like working for this guy. I'm going to go over here. They have a lot more mobility.
Sure.
The lower class is not as low as like the peasant class in other countries.
Okay.
And their feudal system is much more familial and relatable. It's less about like, oh, my landlord is just the worst, and more like, well, that's my cousin, or the landlord doesn't live that much higher and better above me.
Okay.
The Irish nobility don't live in castles. That's a Norman thing. That's even the English didn't do that until the Norman conquest. So
All right.
that is a thing that's going on there. So
Okay.
McMurrow says these guys are warriors. These guys are killing machines.
Yep.
And they're always looking for a fight.
Let's get them. Let's use them.
I'll call them up, see if they want to fight, and I'll promise them some land.
Perfect.
So,
Okay.
beginning an extremely long tradition of the English showing up because somebody promised them some land,
Yes.
these knights sail across and they're like, so we hear you need somebody killed. Point us in the right direction. Well, they took my homeland and they took Ulster and or Leinster, and I'd like it back. And you can have like a chunk of it. I'm like, cool. So they just beat up they kill a lot of people and basically reconquer the country for him. And he's like, yeah, I got my country back.
Kicking England out.
Then they call their friends.
Cool.
The Normans call because he was deposed not by England. He was deposed by his own Irish folk. And now he's calling the English, who are now becoming the English. Like our modern perception of the English is very different.
Got it. Okay.
The Normans.
What year are we in?
This is 1169.
Okay, all right.
So
We're
to
a
give
ways
kind
off,
of
all
to
right.
give kind of a cultural thing about what England is,
Mm-hmm.
everybody tries to say like, well, the English are like this really pure thing, and they're not. There were in the long ago.
In the long
ago.
Okay.
A long time ago. Before the Norman conquest.
Do you have the whole song?
I
You better have
should.
the song.
I really
All
should.
right.
I'm gonna write a song.
you
I'm
get to work on it.
gonna write a song on that.
Okay.
But a long time ago, there were the Bretons or the Britons. The Bretons are. This is confusing. The Bretons are like French, and the Britons are the people on the British Isles. The Romans invaded, did some conquering, got halfway up, and said, "We can't conquer anymore."
Too cold.
Kind of intermingled, and then left.
Okay.
Basically, the Romans ran into the Scots and just said, "Nope,
Okay.
you people are scary," and then they left. But they left some Romans back. So we're mixing the Britons and the Romans.
Right, yes.
Also, at this time, we have the Angles coming across. The Angles are kind of a Germanic people.
Okay. Were they coming in at an
And they
angle?
sail across, and they come in at an angle. That's why. It's
Yeah,
because
okay. Sure.
there's an angle of the English Channel.
Yeah.
And they went,
That's
whoop.
why. That's obviously why.
Exactly. They conquer and intermingle with the Britons. So now you have the Angles. Then the Saxons come in,
Yeah.
and now we have the
Anglo-Saxons,
Anglo-Saxons, who are Germans.
Oh.
So all these people are like, oh yes, our proud Anglo-Saxon tradition. You're German.
Yeah, but what is Germany?
Germany! It's a huge swath of Germanic people. That's why so many words in English have like a direct correlation to Germanic words.
Oh, okay.
And then we have these Romanized words, and that comes from the Norman conquest that happens in 1066. So then the French Normans, who are also Vikings, because the Normans, meanwhile, are French, but they got conquered by Vikings or given land by the French to go away. So they intermingled. So they're these French Viking people.
Yeah.
So they maintain this warrior bloodline. They're like, well, we don't have enough stuff to kill and conquer. Where should we go? And William of Normandy says, why don't we go west? East is too big. We'll go west.
Yeah.
And so he conquers England with like 5,000 men.
Oh.
Now England is the Norman aristocracy because they won. There's some Anglo-Saxons who are treated like more barbaric, which isn't nice or polite or really that accurate because the Normans weren't much better. But then we have this intermingling of basically French culture and Anglo-Saxon culture. And then the language starts to fold in on itself. You get Middle English, and then you get like later English, and that's the formation of what we nowadays see as the English people.
Okay.
The closest thing you have to like the traditional Britons are the Welsh. That is like the purest
Yeah.
British. So if you're Welsh, you can say, "Yeah, I'm English," because
Right.
that's the real like core original before England was England. That's the original people who like lived on the island.
Right.
And then there's the Scots who are the Picts. And that's like the original inhabitants of the island. And then sorry, thank you. I gotta like reverse it because it's mirrored. I gotta stop. I need a board. We need a board.
Well, that'd be all right.
So
You want to switch sides? We can switch
we
sides.
could switch. No, that's gonna throw off the whole dynamic.
Okay.
It's gonna be weird. So I'll just lean in.
All right.
So you have the majority of England or of the United Kingdom. Scotland's in the north.
Yep.
And they have Wales, which is Western England, and those are like the original peoples who lived on the island. And then you have England itself, who are foreign invaders. They've been there for 1,000 years.
The original melting pot, though. Right?
They are the original melting pot. So I always laugh nowadays because you get these guys who are like super nationalist, xenophobic types in Britain who are like, well, my people are the purest bloodline of England and we go back for... Dude, you're a German. Shush. Like, nobody's pure on this planet.
That's
like,
true.
Nobody.
Well, yeah,
everybody's.
that's true. How about we just think of it that way?
We're all blended. At some point, you go back, and we're all blended. We're all coming from similar places and different places for forever and intermingling, and it's wonderful.
Yeah.
So once you get this tribalist idea out of your head, whatever. But Ireland is this very unique culture that has a lot more to do with the Celts of the olden days. Which is like a Roman era civilization, but also very unique. The Gaels, the Gaelic. They're very related to actually Scotland. Scotland and Ireland, pretty similar. There's a chunk of both that kind of cross over.
Okay.
Where it's like, well, these are actually Scottish people that live in Ireland, and these are actually Irish people who live in Scotland, and they're kind of maybe there was a bridge. There's a legend.
Maybe there was a bridge.
Well, there's a legend of the Giant's Causeway that there used to be a path across.
Okay.
It's a very cool chunk of land that is like a bunch of hexagonal rocks.
Ooh.
And I will send you a picture. It's right there, Giant's Causeway. I think it's one of the coolest things on the planet. It's very neat looking. So we have this melting pot of what we're going to call the English moving forward.
Yes.
Okay, so the Normans for this conquest chunk. They refer to this as the Anglo-Norman invasion. The Irish call it all sorts of things, but I think it's called
they got all sorts of
the
words.
start of the nonsense.
Okay.
So the Normans sail across. They conquer Leinster, allegedly, so that Dermot McMurrough can have his land back. Dermot McMurrough is a very Anglicanized version of the original. The pronunciation is much more complex. I think it's Diarmid. Diarmid. It's Diarmat, but that's Dermot. That's what the English call it. And McMurray is it's like MACH space MURREIGH. I think it's Irish is its own language.
Sure.
So it's complex. And I'm going to do my best to pronounce some of the things correctly because I did some research into pronunciations.
All right. I will not do my best.
Yes. But other stuff, I am going to Anglicanize it, which kind of undermines the whole point of the Declaration of Independence.
But what are you going to do?
But I will beg the pardon of the Irish.
You apologize.
Yep.
Apologize is ignored.
Yep. They'll do the Irish equivalent of a fatwa against me.
Oh,
if he ever comes to Ireland, we're going to have his head.
There'll be some troubles on Will.
There'll be some Will's troubles. Well, add it to the list, Ireland. Add it to the list. So we have this invasion, and the Normans are like, this is some pretty good country over here.
Didn't know how nice it was before we invaded.
It's really green.
Yeah.
Tons of open space. Not as many people.
Easy to invade.
They don't wear as much armor as we do, so it's kind of like coming in and kicking a puppy. I mean, that's not to disparage the Irish. They fight. They're
Or
good
puppies.
fighters, but they don't have like heavy cavalry. It's not really ideally suited terrain for that.
I suppose they also showed their hand by having to ask people to come do their fight.
Exactly. It's like, well, we're good at killing each other, but not in huge numbers, and be a shame if a bunch of guys on horseback showed up, started rampaging, especially if they have an entire warrior society.
Oh, no. But we
It'd be bad
hired
news.
you to fight.
I hope the English don't find out. It'd be a shame if some angry king left and told everybody, oh no,
Uh-oh.
Darmit's pissed. He
Darn
went
it.
and got some friends. So the Normans invade. Now, eventually a fella comes along named Richard Strongbow de Clare. Strongbow is a misnomer. His chronicler is an idiot and wrote a name down that was like I think it's Stringhill or Stringhill,
Okay.
which was like Norman. It was French. All of the Norman knights keep a French name. They don't have like an English name. So de Clare. Like all those French names that you find in England are because of the French nobility. So this fellow, Richard de Clare, would have never been called Strongbow in his time, but by bad translation, this guy wrote Stringil, and then he wrote it down as like Stringhos, which is like strange pants.
Okay.
That's literally what that means. Like strange. It's like foreign breeches, foreign clothes. He thought it was like, oh, it's his nickname because he's dresses as a foreigner.
Strange
ha,
pants.
ha, ha.
Good old
strange pants.
Yeah.
And then it sounded similar to Strongbow.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah,
that's what we'll
sure.
call him. He didn't use a bow. He was a knight.
And he was
mean,
very weak.
Yeah, unlikely. He probably was really strong because he was a knight.
All right.
And he was apparently a very good knight,
Good night.
not good person, good knight.
Good night.
So he was good at killing people.
Yeah.
He rides in and seizes Dublin. He doesn't ride. He takes a boat. He has to take a boat. Ireland's an island. So
Yes.
he takes a boat, and then he rides off the boat on his horse, kills a bunch of people, takes the main trade center of Eastern Ireland.
Ireland is mine.
Okay, yeah. And he
Dublin
says,
is
I
mine.
got this. This is mine. Now, meanwhile, in England, you have King Henry. That King Henry. Father of the Devil's Brood King Henry.
Yeah.
The baddest dude in Europe. The most vigorous king like ever. Henry II. Okay. He is like, well, I can't have my knights running around just conquering stuff. They work for me. So that means that's mine.
Oh.
And I'm not going to have this kind of wannabe kingdom stuff occurring from my knights. I'm going to fix this. So in 1171, he sails across with a huge army and is just like, all right, this stops. You guys stop killing you people. You guys stop killing you people. Everything the Normans have conquered, that's mine now.
Okay.
All right. Now you declare, you get this area. I do declare that you declare, get this. So Strongbow gets Dublin, and then he hands out Leinster to somebody else. So the land this guy wanted reconquered for himself.
Awesome.
He's like, that actually belongs to me now. He's like,
I did all the work.
but I asked you to conquer it for me. He's like, yeah, and we did all the work. So why do I need you?
I mean, I called you.
Well, I know the people. Didn't they kick you out? Oh, well, you got me there. Shut up.
Poor Dermot.
He kind of sets, I wouldn't feel too bad. If his own people ousted him from power, he was probably a bastard. So Henry sets up this power base now and has his guys run different chunks of the country, and then he declares Dublin and other cities crown lands, which means he gets all the money.
Yep.
Smart move. So he basically says the Normans can set up a feudal system and run it Norman style, which is peasants. So now all of these like free-ish lower class people are stuck to the land. They become serfs.
Oh, no.
It completely changes everything. They redo the agriculture, so now they're planting like pear trees and cherry trees, and they're kind of changing the entire landscape. It's becoming more agrarian and pastoral.
No.
Instead of doing like a lot of free-range farming and being kind of... It's more of a leave no trace kind of a style of living that the Irish had, where it was they farmed, but not like these massive fields that you see, where it's 15 families working one field to make a massive amount of crops. It's kind of a subsistence lifestyle, which means the population doesn't grow too much, but it's much more in tune with like our natural state of being. This is almost like a mini industrialization.
No, it's like the Lorax.
It is like the Lorax. They start chopping down all the nice trees. And actually, a big part of this too now is Henry shows up with the full backing of the Catholic Church.
Oh, good.
Now, there's this whole conception that Ireland has always been Catholic.
Yeah.
St. Patrick, yada, yada, yada. That's not true. The Irish have accepted the church at this point, but they don't accept a lot of its more stringent rules. Their marriages are a little looser. I don't think it's like multi-marriage or anything like that, but the ceremony is different. They have a lot more pagan rituals still tied into it because it's their culture.
Sure.
The church doesn't like that. With the
Church
Normans,
does like to be in charge
they
of
like
things.
to be in charge, and
Let's
also
tell you
they
how to
see
do
this.
things,
They
for
see
sure.
this as a chance for tax revenue.
Oh, good.
So religion is always so good, and they care about nothing except
Yeah.
being
Well,
saving
gotta-
souls.
You gotta Have a nice church to save the best souls.
Yep. So what winds up happening is because the Norman aristocracy is so tied up with the clergy, because as we've seen, bishops and priests, cardinals, that is a really wealthy office. And these are guys who like own land. So when we have a medieval bishop, this is oftentimes a guy who wears full armor, rides around on a horse, kills people,
Ooh.
takes stuff. They're not, I'm an old man sitting in a church, bless you. They're landowners, they're lords, they're nobles.
Okay.
And they get to wear like even fancier clothes because they don't have to care about royalty. So the Normans start setting up family members as heads of church. They start building abbeys, they start building churches, and that's where you really start to see all of these big churches be planted basically in Ireland. Now, eventually some of that architecture gets adopted and it gets that kind of a Gaelic style to it. There's the Celtic cross and all this stuff, because we start to see the Irish society fold the Norman society into itself. So culturally, we're still seeing like Irish art, Irish language, things like that, but we're having all of the power is controlled by these English guys. So what ends up happening is Henry leaves and he's like, okay, everything's going to be fine. And the Normans don't stop conquering Ireland. The Irish like made this treaty and thought, okay, cool. Right of conquest, you came in, you beat these guys up, it's fine. We get that. You guys can run this and we'll make you like the nominal overlords of Ireland. We don't really care. We just want to live our lives.
Yeah.
Don't really have a way of stopping a giant Norman invasion. We saw what happened to England 100 years ago. We're good. But the knights want to own it. So they just start killing people and conquering it. And eventually England owns all of Ireland. There are a series of rebellions that happen after this until the 90s, basically. The 1990s. Yes. So we've established now England owns Ireland basically from 1171 onward, despite some treaties.
But also it's kind of Ireland's own fault.
I mean, one Irish king.
Kind of.
He invited, but he got deposed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they got conquered.
Yeah.
And it stinks.
Bad move.
Yeah. 1594 to 1603 is Tyrone's rebellion. Tyrone is Anglicanized from, it was a very long word that ends up sounding kind of like Tyrone. And that was a rising by Tyrone's an area of Ireland. And they rose up and were like, well, we don't like this anymore, and we don't like how English rule is basically oppressing the Irish and making everything English. We're losing our culture. We've lost so much of ourselves, and we're sick of it.
Yeah.
Gets put down. 1641 to 1643. 1653. This is the Irish Confederate Wars. We talked about this. This is after Charles I is deposed and Cromwell's in charge. At first, this is kind of a vying of power between Irish royalists who support England and Irish very early Republicans. The idea that Ireland is its own state and we should have our own confederation of Irish peoples and be free of this nonsense.
Right.
Cromwell shows up, and it's borderline genocide.
Oh, no.
25,000 Irish soldiers die, and between 200 and 600,000 at least. It's probably close to 600,000 people die from famine and attrition and losing their homes and everything else in the span of this. It is the most devastating loss of life in Irish history, including the famine.
Oh. But I bet they've forgotten and forgiven about it.
Oh, yeah. Well, they should just get over it because it happened hundreds of years ago, right?
Sure.
So then 1689 to 91 is the Williamite War or the Jacobite War. So there's this Jacobite rising that happens in England where the children of King James II, there's this issue of succession, and his son, William, wants the throne, so it's the Williamite rising, and it wound up bleeding over into Ireland, which caused a whole war where he was like, hey, Ireland, you can rise up against England, and we'll give it to you if you side with me to fight the English and give me my crown, and blah, blah, blah. It ends in failure because it's not really well planned. 1798, that was the Hurries, is what they called it in Ulster. And that was another rising that ended in failure. 1803... was another rebellion. 1848 was the Young Ireland Rebellion. The Young Ireland movement was this concept of it was like a younger group of people who were like, why are we still letting England tell us what to do? This is crap.
The youth.
Yep. Crushed. 1867 was the Fenian Rising. That was that's like an early concept of like the Sinn Féin movement, which we'll talk about Sinn Féin in a moment. And that is the start of like really like Irish republicanism and Irish nationalism. And the Fenians start to spread globally.
Oh.
We had a Fenian Rising in America, which didn't go anywhere.
Apparently not.
We had
first I've heard of it.
There was a Fenian attempt at conquering Canada, which did not go well.
Okay.
Because they're like, well, we can't reconquer Ireland, so we'll invade Canada. There were Fenians in Australia because they got sent there because they were criminals.
I've not heard of these guys at all. It's the most ineffective.
They're not good at what they did. It's unfortunate because they had a lot of radicals in their midst, and they weren't great at organizing, and they weren't good at reaching the general population in a lot of their movement. So their rising doesn't really go anywhere. It never really gets... It's a lot of loud guys shouting very loudly, but it's a very small minority. Oh. So they're like, yeah, we represent the majority, and the majority like, the way you're going about this is not how we want to do it.
Yeah,
and
we're
then,
not that loud.
Because they're loud about it, the English just arrest them, and they transport them, which is sending them to Australia. And the minimum time when you got transported is 7 years. So they're like, well, they'll cool their heels in an Australian cell.
That will cool down a revolution.
We're not cooling anything. It's bloody hot down here. Do you know how hot it is in Australia?
Oh.
There's sand everywhere. There's bush. We don't like it here. Fenian Rising in Australia. I'm going to try to find one for that.
Yeah, okay.
We haven't really talked much about Australia. We did Ned Kelly, but that wasn't me. And I'm trying to do stuff from around the world.
All right. Well, I've never heard of this, so they must be ineffective.
They're not effective at all. The Fenians are not great. But these risings constantly throw little sparks onto the Irish people, basically. So look at this as one spark doesn't start the fire, but a bunch of them.
Right.
So over time, this is building and building and building. And finally in 1916, and this is the event, this will have its own thing, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about it, but this is the Easter Rising of 1916. This is the Irish start to get more organized. And now we're at the time where guns can do a lot more. Ooh. It really, like, they could not have done what they did without modern firearms. We're past the muzzle loader stage. This is now one guy with a gun can shoot 10 guys and do a lot of damage. We've got explosives. We have machine guns.
Yeah, this is early 1900s.
Automatic weapons. So this is
like World War I.
This is in the midst of World War I.
Yeah. Right.
So this is also, England is seen as weak, and a part of the rising was England demanded conscripts to fight in World War I from Ireland, and the Irish were like, "You treat us like trash.
We're not gonna play
Why
in your war.
would we fight for you? There's no reason for us to fight at all. You treat us like garbage." We're just coming out of the famine that happened in the 1800s, in the mid 1800s, that caused a mass exodus from Ireland, which is why America has a huge Irish population. Is they were basically forced to grow one type of potato, and it caught like a series of different types of bugs and insects and then bacteria that just wiped out the crop. Oh. So they were starving and dying, and the English were like, well, we're going to take all the food and give it to England, and we're not going to give you any. Oops. And they just watched the Irish just waste away and die. And the Irish are like, but we farmed that. Don't care.
Well,
don't care.
That sounds like England.
Yep. It's this... And people wonder why Ireland is mad and why these risings happened. And it was because of, I mean, we think it's bad enough when you have like slavery and oppression of 400 years. This is 700 years of a very similar thing. There's a huge amount of parallels between that, between Ireland and how they were treated, between how America treated our indigenous population, between how America treated its slave population. And actually, the Irish and the Native Americans have had a long time friendly relationship where they've sent aid back and forth.
Oh.
I can't remember if it was like during one of the Irish risings where the natives sent them money and aid, or if it's the Irish sent the natives money and aid. But then during COVID, it happened again, where there was like this coalition that I think it was Ireland sent money to one of the reservations or a couple of them to say, this is payback for the times you guys have helped us. Let us help you. I think the natives sent like a huge amount of food during the famine.
Okay.
Like it's a wild how there was this cooperation between like oppressed peoples.
Yeah.
And that doesn't, I'm not going to get into the oppression Olympics of who had it worse.
Right.
But it's the parallels of.
It is interesting what connections are made.
Yes. And then in America, we see like the results of this, where the Irish come here and they were treated like absolute trash. Like they, modern, there's parallels nowadays, but we have foreign people coming here and they're, want to build walls and do all this other stuff. And rather than try to figure out a solution where we can have coexistence and have people cross into the country and provide some kind of services, or have them provide services in order to live here or anything like that, we're just like very extreme sides, and it gets really bad. And the same thing happened when the Irish came here, when the Norwegians came here, when everybody moved here. But the Irish were treated like garbage until basically Kennedy. Because then there was an Irishman who's the president.
Sure, right.
Right.
And by that time, I'm sure we could find another minority
Yep,
group to
exactly.
get
They
upset
always
at.
pick another minority to treat like trash. So the Irish are used to being just treated like garbage by everybody, and somehow just roll with it. Because I guess, when you're an oppressed people for that long, look at all these oppressed people, they wind up just, well, yeah, we're used to this. This is nothing new.
What are you going to do? It's the way
Well,
we've
we're going to
always been.
declare bloody independence is what we're going to do.
Right. Let's
So
do it.
the Irish are furious at this point.
Yes.
They have the Easter Rising, which was brutally repressed by the English. It builds around an uprising in Dublin. They seized like the central post office. Lots of violence, lots of guns, lots of explosions. And then the Sinn Féin is a political party. They rise up in power, and they are created by a fellow named Arthur Griffith. And they say like a proclamation stating independence in 1918. Now, there's a difference between the Declaration and the proclamation, because this proclamation wasn't like official government thing. This was like kind of a revolutionary branch of the government. But now Sinn Féin has power, and they create what is called, I want to get the name right, the Dáil Éireann, or Éireann. It's the first Dáil. Dáil is parliament,
Okay.
D-A-I-L. But it's got, when you say the D, you put your tongue on the back of your front teeth, and it's almost a th, so it's Dáil. 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 It's got more of a thicker, heavier sound.
Yeah.
Dáil. So there's the Dáil, is what they call it.
Dáil.
It depends where you come from.
Sure.
Dáil isn't the proper pronunciation, but it's spelled Dale, so
Right.
that's what a lot of people say. Dáil is common. Doyle is common. It's like Doyle, but has more of a... Because there's Doyle, which is a name, and then there's the Dáil, which is the parliament.
Okay.
This is what I actually watched. Irishman explained the pronunciation, and there's the three main Irish languages,
That's why you
and
know
he
so
went
much.
through it. It was fascinating.
Okay.
Very informative, and I love to learn that kind of stuff.
Dial.
So there's the Dáil,
Dáil.
and so we'll just call it the Dáil.
Yeah.
The first Dáil decides the government
Yes.
of Ireland. They're the Republican government, which is not to be confused again with American politics of Republican and Democrat and all
Yeah.
this other stuff. Republican just means they believe they should be their own separate country that does not have a king, but is basically a representative democracy, which is kind of what Ireland always was. Even though they had kings, they had a high king, and all of the lesser kings were kind of chosen by the people in a lot of cases, or at least the wealthy nobility. And then they would basically go to the equivalent of a parliament and talk to the king, and they'd have meetings and say, this is what we're going to do for all people.
Okay.
And then they go and do it. So they actually had like a very rudimentary early
How is the High King
parliamentary thing.
picked?
He's picked by the other kings.
Oh.
Usually it's the guy who owns the most land and he is the most powerful.
Okay.
But if the others all band against the High King, then he's powerless.
Yeah.
So it was a great way that they established control. The problem was it did not have this strong established central government. So it's like if instead of having this High King, they had been a united kingdom, when the Normans showed up, they probably would have stood up a much better chance.
If only they were a United Kingdom.
Yeah. Well, now there's the United Kingdom, which is totally different, but as part of Ireland in it, which is part of this. So because they've declared now independence, Sinn Féin is running the country by popular support and representation. England sees a shift. England used to be able to say, well, like the people that are elected in office, largely because they put their finger on the scales and were like,
Yeah.
we don't want you elected. We would like a pro-English people.
yes.
Yeah? We
Rather.
don't want Irish independence. Monarchy all the way, hey chaps? Ha-ha! And
You
also-
voted for it, didn't you?
Also,
Yes.
by keeping them hungry and tired and poor, and then conscripting their soldiers to send to war, they keep Ireland weak, and thus just a tiny little weak colony of their empire.
Yes.
They're quite good at that. Over
Probably
history.
easier also to maintain a colony that's that close too.
Yep. Yeah, you'd think so. Well, that's the thing. It blows my mind. You have this brilliant chunk of land that can do so much, but then you have the people of Ireland who are this unique, wonderful culture, and rather than foster good relationships, they just dump on it and treat them like trash. They're right next to them, and they just treat them like garbage.
Yeah.
They do that to Welsh. They do that to the Scots. If they'd just been like, yeah, let's foster this diversity and greatness within our culture,
I guess we
it
could.
would have built something great.
Sounds like a nice thing to do.
Sounds like a nice thing to do. See, we take that for granted.
But
in
how
the
does it
States a lot of the
benefit
time.
me immediately?
That's right. We take that for granted a lot in the States with this diversity of cultures,
Yeah.
where it's actually like our strength. And then in other places, like, diversity is stupid. Yeah, not really. It's always wonderful. Diversity is always wonderful. We
Yeah.
learn new things. The food is always better that way.
It's true.
We get new music, we get new songs, we get new ideas.
Yeah.
It's great. And then we take the things we don't like, we change that, and that's part of human progress and growing as a society. But the English in this case were like, nope,
Yeah.
colony.
Or we could do that.
Or, better yet, England primacy.
Yeah,
We stay in control. Aha! Well, the first dial does not appreciate this. So they issue this Declaration of Independence.
This one.
This one that we read.
Okay.
Which is
Oh.
right there.
Oh.
That'll be the header image as well.
Okay.
But it's the formal head of the Declaration of Independence, which was printed in multiple languages. It was Irish, English, I think French as well. But the main ones are Irish and English, so that everybody on the islands can read this and understand it. But I
Right.
believe they also wanted French.
Want them to know.
Because-
Yes.
Well, they wanted this read at the Treaty of Paris,
Ah.
which it was the end of World War I.
Oh, while we're wrapping up this war,
Yeah.
one other thing.
We want recognition on the world stage. That was really important because you can say, well, we're our own independent nation, but that's like, Will and Mike declare independence from America. We're just going to live here in Will and Mike-topia.
Hey.
Hey, we're the citizens of Will and Mike-topia,
Mm.
which means we're not going to pay taxes to them. We'll
Yep.
pay taxes to ourselves. And we're going
Yes.
to build our own country. And yeah, that's great. But then the local municipality can just come in and be like, where's your
yeah.
taxes?
Oops.
I
suppose they could ask.
And the local cops could arrest us for crimes.
Uh.
You know, there's no international recognition.
Right,
So
right.
they need the rest of the world to say, yeah, that's a legit country.
I would like to, on the record, Mike and Will, Utopia.
Mike and Will Topia. Sorry, not Will and Mike Topia. This is your house.
Yeah.
But if we did it at my house,
Then maybe we'll discuss.
Will and Mike Topia.
Don't make you
How
start
about
a civil war.
we could
I will
have-
start a
we
civil
will
war.
start- Which is what happened in Ireland after this.
Okay.
Okay. So the Irish have declared their independence.
Yay.
Immediately thereafter, there is a group of Irish peoples
Yes.
who have been fighting basically nonstop since 1916. It's not been like open warfare, but this is constant guerrilla warfare. We're talking truckload of soldiers is riding by a farmhouse, and suddenly it gets attacked by, they thought they were just farmers, but they're actually some local boys who got some guns and shoot up the truck and maybe kill somebody, maybe just cause chaos. There's assassinations, there are kidnappings, there are beatings. And for every single act of violence, there's always a reprisal. Usually the reprisals from England are really extreme and one-sided. So if what's called the IRA, the Irish Republican Army,
Yes.
if they do something, which is almost always in reprisal to, well, we're being occupied by England, so we're going to shoot at the British soldiers. The British soldiers will, like, beat the crap out of, like, 15 people and maybe shoot somebody. It's always a more extreme measure than what the Irish do.
It strikes me that there's always a way in occupied lands sort of things. So like similar to like in Palestine and Israel, where like there's people here and we can't really have all out just war.
Right.
We just have to keep doing these little things, and each one is a response to the other one.
Yep.
But we responded to this, but you responded too much. Oh well, then we're gonna have to respond to it. And it'll just go on.
It's always escalation that just
Escalation, but not enough escalation to make it.
It never gets to full-scale war, and the people that suffer the most are always the civilian population.
Yeah.
Always the civilians get hit the hardest because you've got partisan fighters on both sides. Usually we're talking like partisans that in many cases are labeled as terrorists, which is what the British government did to the IRA. They labeled them as all terrorists. And we have to explain the difference between the IRA and Sinn Féin of this time period that we're talking about versus the IRA and Sinn Féin of the 1960s to the 1990s, because of what's going to happen during this rising. So the IRA decides. The IRA is not centrally led quite right now. It's after the rising, it's basically operating in cells in different organizations. There's nominal leadership, but most of the volunteers just kind of do what they think is the best thing to do.
Okay.
It's not a great system. Once the Dáil releases this declaration, some local boys decide we're going to escalate this to a full-scale war.
Yeah, we might as well.
They find out that there is a shipment of explosives being moved by just two what are called the Royal Irish Constabulary, which is the IRC. They're local boys, local Irish folk, who work directly for England as police. They're like a national police force. They're semi-military, and they're usually have like Anglo-Protestant ties or are majority Anglo-Protestant favorites. Like they might not be all Irish. Some of them are drawn from people who have like Norman ancestry, that kind of a thing. They're like kind of mixed.
Okay.
Most of them are not like the classic Irish Catholic local folk.
Okay.
That are the overwhelming majority. So they have like ties to Britain. They can be trusted.
Were the people who were brought in as well? Were they brought in, or did they had to live
We'll
there?
get to that.
All right.
We're gonna get to that because the RIC are moving these things along, and these four guys, Sean Treacy, Seamus Robinson, Sean Hogan, and Dan Breen, are in Tipperary, and it is what's called the Soloheadbig. It's Irish. It's very difficult to pronounce. Ambush, where the four guys jump the soldiers, kill the two guys. There are two people who work for like the town council that are there. They don't hurt them. They steal the bombs. There are arrests made. One of the guys winds up in prison. He gets busted out of prison on a train, which is awesome because it's like, train reverse.
His escape vehicle was a train?
Well, he was being transported on a train from like one prison to another. And the IRA got wind of this, and they did a train robbery, but it was a person.
Robbed a person from it.
Yeah. This is like the match.
Yes.
Now it's on. The Dáil decides we are not going to declare war on England. They refuse to make it a full-scale Ireland versus England because they're going to get massacred.
Sure.
Like England now is done with World War I, and they have a huge unemployed soldier population.
Nothing but free time
Yes.
and lots of soldiers.
Lots of soldiers with nothing to do. These guys are in breadlines, some of them.
Oh, no.
So they're broke and violent.
Nothing helps an
And
economy like a good war.
It's not like soldiers coming back from World War I have the equivalent of post-traumatic stress and have dealt with atrocities that nobody can possibly comprehend up until this point
How
because
would we even
war's never been fought on this scale.
How would we even study that?
We wouldn't even know.
Yeah.
And they don't have a job.
All right.
So England sees this rising coming, and they're like, well, we're going to have this be an Irish problem. We'll have the Irish cops handle this. That's why we have the Royal Constabulary. They'll deal with it. Well, it starts to escalate and get worse and worse. And Ireland has this guy named Michael Collins.
Michael Collins.
Michael Collins, right there. Portrayed by Liam Neeson in the film. Michael Collins. And apparently, he's pretty close in form and function, because Michael Collins was a big dude. He was strong, he was fearless, and he was a brilliant speaker. He was at the Easter Rising. He's a patriot. He's very pro-Irish independence. He's a fighter. He was elected to the Dáil as a representative of, I think, County Cork, of where he comes from. And he winds up getting set up in the IRA as the head of the counterintelligence movement, which means spy versus spy.
Ooh, okay.
It is brutal what winds up happening. He creates what's called the Squad, also called the 12 Apostles, which I think is super, that's so Catholic, that's so Irish, I love it. But it's a hit squad. They're assassins. Like that's their whole thing is, well, we know where the English are. We know where their operatives are. We know who the head of the constables are. We know all of these leadership guys. We're gonna whack them. That's our job. We kill them.
We're gonna whack them.
We're gonna kill them.
Right.
We're gonna find them where they live, and we're gonna kill them. We don't have a problem with that. They are ruthless, because these, again, we've seen centuries of oppression. So now we've gotten to the point where, like, well, this is all that it's gonna. This is the only thing that works.
Yeah.
This is the only thing now that we've tried peaceful means for hundreds of years. We have tried rebellions. We have tried all this other stuff. Let's just kill them, and not just in open battle. Let's kill them where they sleep, because they start hitting them at like their offices. It's very intense stuff that goes on. So we have the two separate groups. We have the IRA, which Collins is a member of, but he's also part of the Dáil. And the Dáil remains independent of the battles, of the war, of the killing, so that they can pursue diplomatic means. And they have a fellow, Eamon de Valera, which does not sound Irish at all.
No.
He's Irishman. And he's the head of Sinn Féin at this point. So he's almost like the equivalent of like the party president, but he got thrown in jail by the British. He gets busted out. He escapes from Lincoln Jail in February 3rd, 1990. And then he winds up traveling to the U.S. to get support from the U.S. for their independence. The Senate declares that they should be supported.
The U.S. Senate?
The U.S. Senate says we should do something about this at the Paris Treaty, at the Paris Accord, and we should talk about this because we believe in a free and independent people, because we are a free and independent people.
Yes.
And, we fought the British too, so maybe we should get in on this.
Be nice to finish up that one.
Yeah, it starts to build traction there. So we've got the Dáil having to walk this very fine line of, we are not the IRA, but we do run an independent country. And what the IRA does is not in violation of our borders and our independence. They are simply patriots fighting against a foreign garrison.
Okay. And we all agree.
They specifically mention the
killing's
foreign
bad,
garrison.
but,
Like,
yeah.
they say these are occupying soldiers. So as Irish folk are allowed to protect their homes and their land, but we don't declare war. We just want to be very clear, we did not declare war. Because then if England sends in the full brunt of their military,
Right.
they're the real bad guys. Well, Britain doesn't send in the full brunt of their military. They start sending in what they call auxiliary forces, or auxiliary forces. And this is where we start to see what are called the black and tans.
Oh,
The black and tan,
not just a delicious beverage.
no. So the black and tan is not a good thing in Ireland.
Uh-oh.
Originally, I guess the concept of the black and tan was based around a hunt, and they called the black and tans were called that because of the number of beagles that were used in the hunts. Little black and tan dogs.
Sure, yeah.
Cute. Well, these soldiers start showing up. They're English. These are those unemployed World War I veteran soldiers. These guys are killers. They're not cops.
Yeah.
They're sent there, and their uniform is like a dark coat and khaki pants. So black and tan.
There we go.
They're skull crushers. That's their job. They go in with clubs and beat up people, but they also have machine guns. Like they have Lewis guns, which is a machine gun. They're armed to the teeth. They have rifles. They have pistols. They are kind of given carte blanche to do what is necessary to reestablish order. They are famous for not having great discipline and for horrific reprisals.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so
Let's have those guys lead
this
the
is
great.
great. You got a bunch of guys who are veterans of one of the worst wars in the history of anything.
Yes.
At this time, this is the Great War. It is horrifying, and then you're like, go to Ireland and establish
Just
order,
fix things.
fix it. And their officers are they just kind of let them. It's encouraged. Like the English would say, we never encouraged that, but you didn't stop it.
You sure didn't. Yeah. Seems like it sure set them up.
So you've got, this is going to go well, right? You've got the black
guess.
and tans who are cracking heads and shooting folk. You've got the IRA and like the 12 apostles who are like, we're going to kill people because we're sick of this nonsense. You have the Dáil trying to maintain peace and build some kind of international community and recognition for the country. And then you have the average Irish person just like, I just want to like live.
Yeah.
Maybe catch the football, maybe, you know, have a pint, play some music, go to work,
Yep.
raise my family,
Yep.
go to church on Sunday. Well, Sunday is a problem in Ireland because
Oh.
now, 21 November 1920, so a year after, almost a full year after, no, that's almost 2 years after the war, or the declaration. We have Michael Collins decides he knows where the main core of British intelligence in Ireland is. They call them the Cairo Gang. There's two
Cairo
reasons.
Gang.
Now, this is there's kind of a debate about if any contemporary actually called it that. There was one source that said, oh, well, they call them that because they all had a service in North Africa, which seems nonsensical because there also was the Cairo Cafe in Dublin.
Okay.
So it's theorized that that's where they met. So they call them the Cairo Gang.
Okay.
Whether or not that's actually what they were called, that's the term that's been applied to this group. And it was like 15 guys. It was mostly, they were British nationals, members of the Royal Irish Constabulary, and then civilian informants. Collins hits all of them. 12 men are killed, 3 are wounded. 4 of his guys get caught.
Okay.
The black and tans are unleashed.
Oh, no.
They send him to a football match.
Send who?
The black and tans. So they're at Croke Park in Dublin.
Park.
Croke Park. Croke. Croke Park. There's a game of Gaelic football. I don't know actually the differences between Gaelic football and English football. I imagine it's just more Irish.
Okay.
I don't know what that means. It's just nicer, more fun.
It's like Canadian football and American
Canadian
football.
football. I'm sure there's just little tweaks in the rules, but either way. But this is a cultural event, right?
It's a totally different game.
It's totally different. It's totally different. It's different football. We're not English.
It's probably how conversations
I
happen.
feel like there's a huge it's not English football. It's different. Which, whatever. That's fine.
Either way, it's probably soccer anyway.
But because it's Gaelic, there's a cultural
Sure.
attachment to this. It's a very, very Irish event. The black and tans show up and they do what's called a cordon and search.
Oh.
Nobody leaves. We're checking you all for guns. Tensions escalate.
You'd think, yeah.
The British claim they were fired upon. There is nobody in the crowd who agrees with this.
Well, why would they?
So they just start shooting into the crowd.
Oh, no.
Now, no British soldiers died. None are even recorded as being injured.
Oh, that's not a good alibi on their side.
14 people are killed and 60 are wounded by gunfire, at least. It might be more. It's not great. 2 of the assassins who are caught are beaten and shot in the head, allegedly because they were escaping. 2 more are hanged the next year. This is Bloody
people
Sunday.
from the Collins. Okay, that's Bloody Sunday.
That's
Oh,
Bloody Sunday. There's 2 Bloody Sundays.
Oh.
Because, meanwhile, we have sectarian violence in Northern Ireland, which starts to be between Catholics and Protestants. Protestants are the majority there. The Irish are the minority. This goes way, way back to this is where the English were. This is where the original Norman conquest was. This is the chunk of land that they were holding way back in the day. And then Dublin was way down here. Because there's like lots of Irish on Irish violence, this intensifies and it gets worse and worse. So this is the first Troubles. And this is 1920 to 1922, where it's this really nasty bit of violence. On 10 July 1921 is the Belfast Bloody Sunday. On July 11th, they're planning on having a truce, which is kind of the final
Planning on having a truce.
They've said we're going to have the truce starts on the 11th, and that ends all violence in everywhere except what is established as Northern Ireland.
Okay.
That's
Nice.
the IRA is going to hold off operations. The British are going to hold off operations. No, the British are going to leave. We're going to have all this work, and then Ireland is just going to have you guys are going to have this little enclave in Northern Ireland. That's fine.
It's fine.
It's not fine, but what winds up happening is the cops decide, well, we're going to raid the Republicans that are in Northern Ireland now, right before this treaty is signed, because we can. The Republicans know it's coming. They ambush the cops. There's a brawl. There's violence. Then the loyalists decide, well, if you guys want to attack cops, we're going to just start killing Catholics.
Ew.
So they attack Catholic enclaves throughout the city.
It's a problem when you escalate. You run out of things to escalate.
They just start burning things and smashing stuff up. 17 people at least are killed and 100 are injured.
Ew.
So,
yep.
Really bad days. Sunday's not a great day in this time period. On 11 July 1921, the truce begins, and the violence is supposed to end outside of Northern Ireland. It largely does. There's still fighting. There's still killings. A 12-year-old girl died on the day of the signing while just crossing a street in Belfast. 6 December 1921 is the Anglo-Irish Treaty, which basically establishes that Ireland is its own country, but Northern Ireland is going to be its separate thing. This immediately causes... This uses what they call the casus belli, the cause of war, is the Irish Civil War between the pro-treaty forces and the anti-treaty forces who don't think this should happen. And Collins, who's like this hardcore Republican, is like, dude, a win is a win. We're going to take this win and ride with it. And we're going to be all about the treaty until we can finally fold Northern Ireland back into the fold, and it's fine. And that goes on for 2 more years. On top of it, during that, Collins is killed whilst traveling through the countryside in an armored car because sectarian violence, they don't want him there. Sinn Féin splits into 2 parties. So now it's no longer called that. It's 2 separate parties. I didn't want to butcher the names, so I'm not even going to try.
They didn't just go to Sean and Féin?
No. And then the remaining like core original idea of Sinn Féin, this revolutionary branch, they focus entirely on Northern Ireland. They basically don't have any power in Parliament. They're a minority branch for the longest time. They recently, like 2000s wise, had a resurgence. But from 1960 to 1998 is when stuff really escalates again in Northern Ireland, and finally they have a treaty that we'll also talk about. I think that's a really important one. But this Irish War of Independence, that's the direct cause of the Declaration.
Yeah.
The independents lose 491 combatants. The RIC, which is the Royal Constabulary, they lose 523. And the British lose 413, 900 civilians die. So 2,500 people over the course of 2 years. These are not huge numbers, but when you have a much smaller population, and that doesn't count beatings, imprisonment, starvation, pain and suffering.
Well, sure, and the entire mental atmosphere of the times.
Oh God, it must be so tense.
Non-stop threat and
non-stop.
And
no matter, every time you see a soldier, you don't know if they're going to do a reprisal, or just get shot for being a soldier.
Yeah.
Every time that you, as a member of the constabulary, go anywhere and see anybody, you might get shot or you might be told to shoot them. I cannot imagine
Yeah.
the tension. Nowadays, we get people talking about like treason or tyranny and people being oppressive. It's like, you guys have no idea what those words mean. This is real, like, this is hardship. This is difficulty. You guys don't even have a comprehension of that. So that is the Irish Declaration of Independence and what preceded it. And what happened immediately thereafter?
A lot of information before and
So
after
much
the event.
information.
We'll probably dip into different aspects over the next couple of years. We'll see.
Yeah, I'd like to do that.
But right now, that's just that.
That's
the Declaration of Independence.
Yep.
If you have any thoughts or corrections on this or opinions, feel free.
Books to read,
all that kind of stuff.
requests for
Put it in the
future
comments.
events,
Put that in the comment as well.
but not next week because we have one for next week.
We're set for next week. Like and subscribe, obviously.
Yep.
And then next week we'll be discussing Captain Kidd. A pirate.
He was a pirate, a Scots pirate.
1645.
Aye,
Okay.
this is his birthday.
Captain
We're celebrating the birth of a pirate.
One day, Captain Kidd was just a little kid.
He was a
Let's find out
baby.
when
He was
a
a
little baby.
wee baby. He was a wee.
All right, so like and subscribe. Support us if you can. Tell your
Yes.
friends. Pass the word. Be good to each other. And we'll talk to you later.
Bye, guys.
Bye.